our series on the various centennial celebrations. We had already in 1776, 1826, and right now we've got Ron Chrzanowski.
Chrzanowski, I knew it. Chrzanowski. I practiced.
All right. Ron is a retired social studies teacher who lives in Batavia and has lived in Batavia since 1982. He and his wife Annie were originally from Buffalo, where he attended Bishop Ryan High School, and Annie, as I call her, attended Immaculate Academy. Ron taught social studies and English classes at Archbishop Curley High School in Baltimore. I've heard some stories on that one. So. And then at Turner High School in Buffalo before joining the faculty at Byron Bergen High School in 1982. Annie has worked many years for the City Council City School District at John Kennedy School. Their son Daniel, a social studies teacher as well. Apple doesn't drop far from the tree. And teaches at Pavilion High School. Ron's graduate degree is from the University of Loyola, Chicago. His and Daniel's quest to attend the home stadium of every Major League Baseball team was completed at Chase Field in Phoenix, Arizona, April of 2024. I never got invited. All right, Ron, take it away.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome. We are in the summer of 1876. Among other things, the title of the book refers to Outlaws and Lawmen and Legends of the American West. The book focuses on three major events in that summer. One being the Battle of the Little Bighorn, the murder of Bill Hickok, Wild Bill Hickok, and Jesse James' infamous Northfield bank raid. He intersperses a lot of different things as the book goes on. He'll mention Wyatt Earp. Something I wasn't aware of Wyatt Earp was he was quite a boxer, and quite often when the town wanted killings to kind of go down, uncooperative people coming into the town, maybe mostly cattlemen, if he asked them to not come to a certain part of town without their gun, and they didn't cooperate, he took his guns off and got into a street fight with them, and almost never lost. One of the other things he instructed his deputies is if they don't cooperate, they would hit them on top of the head with their gun butt. This was an attempt to cut down on killings. He also, in this time period, he is partnered with Bat Masterson, and they're the law in Dodge City, along with some of Wyatt Earp's brothers and family. If you recall, if you can go back far enough to the TV show about Bat Masterson, he always had a cane. The actual Bat Masterson did have a cane, and he needed it because he got involved in a gunfight with a disgruntled poker loser who tracked him down and shot him in the groin and almost killed him. He miraculously survived that and needed that cane pretty much the rest of his life. Brings in Buffalo Bill, Calamity Jane, who was a real calamity. And Deadwood is actually an illegal town in the Dakotas, and I'll get a little bit into that later. And also, this is the summer where we have the National League of Baseball, they used two words, close. It's their first season. Now, all of these things were of really heightened interest to people around the country, but the way they found out about things was through newspapers. Okay? And newspapers were devoured, but that was the main source of information for most people. I'll start off with a lighter thing of baseball. February 2nd of 1876, 8 men met in New York City and organized the National League of Professional Baseball Clubs. It's the first organized sports team, sports league in America that is still on. They had 8 teams, 2 divisions, Philadelphia, Boston, Hartford, New York, and in the West, Chicago, St. Louis, Cincinnati, and Louisville. Opening day was April 22nd, and Boston visited Philadelphia and beat them 6-5. A name you might be familiar with, the starting pitcher for Chicago was a man named Al Spalding, and he and his brother started a sporting goods store, and they're the ones who basically designed and made the first, what we would call hardball. And they made hardball and baseballs for the National League and obviously later on the American League for 101 years. And in 1977, Rawlings took over. They played 70 games in that first season, and they played each other team 10 times, and whoever had the most wins, they're the champion. There are no playoffs, as we would know them. And Chicago was the first champion. To more serious things. Back in 1839, and this is a background to the conflict with the Native Americans. 1839, a columnist named John O'Sullivan wrote an article entitled "The Great Nation of Futurity." And in that article, he writes about the United States becoming a country of destiny and progress and greatness, etc. In 1845, he wrote another article promoting the annexation of Texas. And it's in that article that he coined that term, manifest destiny, which obviously caught on and was going to be a driving force in the movement west. Unfortunately for the Native American population, one of the tenets was that their way of life has to be destroyed. They're too archaic, they're too savage, and they can't continue. After the Civil War, westward expansion is really going on and has been going on for decades. And the Native Americans always seem to be an obstacle in one way or another. And the military general, some of them, the main one was General Phil Sheridan of Civil War fame. He was a real driving force behind this. But Grant was involved. Grant was president at the time, obviously was the main general in the Civil War. They pretty much all concurred, except William Tecumseh Sherman was a little wary of what this plan was. Sheridan's plan was there has to be an all-out war against the Native Americans. They have a choice. They either submit to going to the reservation, which was land that nobody really wanted, not very sustainable. They either go there or they get killed. And he thought this conflict was inevitable, and his mentality was, let's get out there, let's do it, and get it over with. By 1876, we're in the southern plains, and the Indians of the southern plains are pretty much subdued, but not the northern tribes. What complicates things is in 1874, gold is discovered in the Black Hills, this area of the Dakotas. It's going to turn out to be one of the richest gold deposits on the planet. The problem is, in 1868, the US government deeded the Black Hills to the Lakota for all time. That's the problem. Now there's gold. White miners kept coming in, and this was Indian territory. They were not supposed to be coming. And at times the army was trying to push them back unsuccessfully. Eventually, Grant even tried to buy the Black Hills back. I read an other source that said one of the government agents met with some Indian chiefs, and one of the chiefs picked up a speck of ground, and he tossed it in the air and said, "We're not interested in even selling that much. We are not interested." And the Grant was unsuccessful in buying it back. So here was the plan. It's late December 1875. Government runners were sent to all the tribal groups throughout this area, the northern plains of Native Americans. And they're in winter, what they're traditional winter camps. They're smaller, and the message was, you'll be on the reservation by January 31, 1876, or the U.S. Army wages war. Now you have to consider where they're living. This is winter in the northern plains. Indians are, you expect us to move now. And it seems like a setup. Sheridan's plan was, he knew they weren't going to all cooperate. So in early February, his idea is they would attack the Indians while they were in their small winter camps. There would be 3 columns. One is going to come from North Dakota, another one from Montana east, and from Wyoming south to north. And these columns would basically catch the Indians in their winter camps where they're in smaller groups and kill them before they can unite. Never happens. He thought they would just get on their horses and go, and that it's winter for them too. So that really, the plan never works. In the meantime, the Native Americans are gathering, and they have no intention of going to the reservation. The very first fight with the U.S. Army and the column that came from Wyoming, they went north in mid-March. And they came from Wyoming into this area, and they came across a Cheyenne camp. And they decided to attack it, but at night, when the Native Americans are all sleeping. So they come swooping in, and there's massive chaos. They're shooting and screaming and running. In all of this, a few Native Americans were killed and wounded, but they all pretty much escaped. And they burned that village to the ground, and that was the end of it. The Native American population, they moved to a camp where Crazy Horse was, and then following that, Crazy Horse and all these tribal groups were going to gather with Sitting Bull. And none of them had any intention of going to the reservation. It was the Sioux, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, and they're getting bigger and bigger as the weeks are going on. In the meantime, there's preparations for the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia, which was the very first World's Fair that was going to happen in the United States in 1876. It would go from May to November. Thomas Edison would be there, Alexander Graham Bell. But what I found interesting is one of the big highlight displays, if you will, at the fair were guns. And they displayed about 230 different handguns. I mean, these like circles of them. And then they also showed about 200 different rifles. So it's obvious at that time, and it's always been the case, of a developing gun culture that has always had America's attention. Now the 7th Cavalry, famous 7th Cavalry, they don't leave the Dakota Territory from Fort Lincoln until the end of March. And by this time, they all realize there's never going to be a case where they're attacking Indians in a winter camp. They leave with 1,200 men and 1,600 horses and mules. And it's called the Dakota Column. Custer had gotten himself in a lot of hot water, politically and militarily. At one point, Grant suspended him from the military, and he was not going to lead this column. But he had the reputation of being America's #1 Indian fighter. And so Grant said, well, I guess we have to let him go with them. But he's not in command. When they leave, there's 2 wings. There's Major Reno's wing and Captain Benteen. 12 companies altogether. We're talking about 1,200 men. 4 of these companies have no combat experience whatsoever. None. Out of all of these 1,200 men, only about 200 ever had any experience fighting Native American warriors. They have no idea what that's like. A lot of them are barely trained, and they're pretty much raw recruits. Even the horses, I never thought of this one. These horses that are going to go into battle first had to be trained to be able to handle the shooting, the screaming, the yelling, the surrounding, the charging. The horses weren't ready either. So they had a problem even when they did get into battles with the horses weren't trained for this. Sitting Bull is kind of moving this massive Indian village further west, and he's going to end up here, where eventually that Battle of Little Bighorn will take place. Then the columns are split again. Custer takes 5, Reno takes 3, Benteen takes 3, and they're all split up looking for the Indian village. They have no idea where it is. They're just looking for it. And then the Montana column takes off towards the end of the month. They're coming from this area this way. So you've got coming this way, they're coming this way, they're coming this way. But they don't know where the Indians are. And they're all split up. And Sheridan, who was behind this, he never really had a plan for them. He thought, we'll send them out. Any one of them could find these Indians and get rid of them. Or maybe they'll all join up somehow. They'll cooperate, and then they'll go get the Indians. But no matter what the scenario, there is no way a Native American Indian village survives any of these columns of the U.S. Army. That just can't happen. Okay? It's unimaginable. Now, May 16th, the Montana column scouts, they spot an enormous Indian village. They think there's about 1,000 warriors here. But they're on the north bank of the Yellowstone River, up here. And the Indian village is on the south side of the Yellowstone. They try to cross the river, but it's May, and the river is raging. So they attempt it, just can't do it. Meanwhile, the Indians are on the other side, up on a bluff, on their horses, watching them. And he realizes, now they know we're here. There's no surprise. And he realizes he's outnumbered at least 2-1. So he says he's not going to attack this village. There's no surprise. It would be suicidal. His decision is, instead of attacking, continue up this way and meet up with that column coming out of North Dakota. And then they would then be able to find the Indians and attack. In the meantime, that column from Wyoming, after they got into this battle up here, they went back down, and then they came back up. But there's very little communication between them and the other two, almost none. The Lakota are aware of all three of them. They know where they are, they know they're coming, and in their minds, these guys are walking into the biggest trap and surprise of their lives. The crook who gets into a battle again in this area, he gets into about a 6-hour battle with the Indians. And they go back and forth for about 6 hours. They're charging, they're retreating, they're charging, they're retreating, and it's basically a stalemate. And he decides that his scouts tell him that if you try and get at the village where they are, there's an area where there's going to be a perfect ambush and you'll be annihilated. Wants nothing to do with that. And so he comes back to the fort in Wyoming. Not the fort, he comes away from that battlefield to their base camp, and he settles back for 6 weeks, and he totally misses the Battle of the Little Bighorn. He has no idea what's going on up there, and the soldiers up there have no idea what he's doing. In the meantime, the intelligence that he gathered, when he realizes how big the Indian village is, how big the warrior army will be, he tells the northern columns nothing. He sends nothing to them. So they have no idea. So now you end up with Custer being separated from his other 2 columns, and he's going in to attack a village that he has no idea of the size of this warrior army. None. While he is on one side of the Little Bighorn and Benteen's on the other side of the Little Bighorn, Reno, this Colonel Reno gets attacked and he's almost done in. In the meantime, Custer's deciding to attack the village. Now, all the time, the plan was that these columns would unite and then attack once they knew where the village was. Before they all left, they all told Custer, now look, if you spot the Indian village, don't go attacking, wait for us. He responded, no, I don't think I will. And he never did. He ends up being isolated and wiped out by about 1,000 Indian warriors. The other 2 columns, they survive. And all Custer's Battle of the Little Bighorn is June 25th, totally wiped out, and all his soldiers. The other 2 columns are still out there, and it's 100 degrees. There's a lot of dead horses, and in the book he says the horses are actually cooking. He says the stink and the smell is just agonizing. The next day, those two columns are taking fire from the Native American warriors until about 4 o'clock. Dead silence. And about 5 o'clock, a giant smoke screen comes up. And 8,000 people and 20,000 horses are leaving. And the Native Americans just head south. And the American soldiers aren't quite sure what happened. They eventually go and obviously discover the case of what happened. Meanwhile, the command of Custer's unit, as General Terry, has no idea what happened. And he's supposed to meet Custer on the 26th. All these columns would gather together, and then they would attack. Well, on June 27th, he finds out that they did find Custer and 197 dead soldiers, and most of the 7th Cavalry has been seriously killed. He won't believe it. He says, somebody's got something wrong here. It's going to send shockwaves across the whole country because this was unimaginable that anything like this could have happened. Obviously it did. How did the Americans find out? Well, it's not till July 6th, that a Clement Lonsbury writes this story of about 1,500 words. It takes 22 hours to send it by telegraph to the New York Herald. And it hits all the papers across the country, and it's a shock. Sheridan finds out when he's at the World's Fair, and his first reaction was, it can't happen. Well, it obviously did. The columns go on all summer. They're still looking for the Indians. But Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, they kind of divide. They're wandering around through here, and then Sitting Bull's going to start going to Canada. And these 3 columns are stomping around this whole area during July and August, and they don't find Indians. Finally, on September 5th, they decide this is it. One of the captains of this Dakota column was quoted as saying, "As the Sioux have failed to find us, we're going home." And all this column goes back, this column goes back, this column goes back. So when we talk about the Battle of the Little Bighorn, it's really like 3 different battles. And Custer's not really even in charge of the column that he took. But obviously he was the most legendary figure in all of this. Crazy Horse roams around for about a year, then he surrenders. But in May of 1877, he is killed by a soldier with a bayonet, resisting arrest. Sitting Bull, they go up to Canada, they stay a few years. By 1881, he comes back and surrenders. They treat him as a prisoner of war. He's on a Standing Rock reservation in Dakota, and he is shot and killed on December 15th of 1890, and he was shot by agency police who were Native Americans. You may have heard of the Lakota had a ghost dance, and the ghost dance frightened the daylights out of the Army and the settlers. The idea behind the ghost dance was that all the Lakota who died would come back to life. The world would be turned upside down. The buffalo would come back, and the white man would be gone. And the Army was interpreting that as they're going to start a revolution. And never really happened, but they thought that Sitting Bull was kind of involved in all this stuff. But while being arrested, he gets shot. I was surprised to, Crazy Horse was only 37 years old when he died. And Sitting Bull was about 59. I could take 5 minutes, I want to cover quickly Jesse James. This is the infamous Northfield raid. Jesse and Frank James. They were part of the Quantrill Raiders during the Civil War. Never part of the Confederate Army, but they fought for the South. But they were a guerrilla group. They were often referred to, the term was bushwhackers. They would ambush people, they would terrorize people, even civilians in the Missouri area that they thought were pro-North. That's what they did. And they were considered the most savage unit in the whole Civil War on either side. They were just killers. After the Civil War, all of a sudden there's a crime spree all over this area. And it's linked to Jesse James. Bank robberies, train robberies, stagecoach robberies. There's a newspaper editor, John Newman. He romanticizes this stuff. And Jesse loves seeing his name in the newspapers. At one point, he even wrote the article about his robbery. He loved it. He loved the attention. Eventually, he joins up, the James brothers join up with the Younger brothers, and they form the James Younger gang. There's Cole, John, Jim, and Bob Younger. The Pinkertons are after them. And Alan Pinkerton, after a while, he comes to the conclusion, it's real simple. They must die. And he starts off by having them attack his mother's house while they're asleep again. And his mother is hit with shrapnel in the elbow. Her arm has to get amputated without anesthetics of any kind. And his 8-year-old stepbrother dies the next morning. Jesse and his wife take off to Nashville. But he'll come back. In August, this James and Younger gang are up in Minnesota. And they're in Minneapolis. They were also taking hotel rooms, and they were up there to scout out a hit. And they're looking for something to rob, because that's what they did. They were outlaws. They honed in on this First National Bank of Northfield. Now, what was a bonus for them was 2 Union generals who they despised from the Civil War were heavily connected and invested to that bank. So not only were they going to get money, but they would get these generals back. They scouted the town of Northfield. They found out it's the only bank in town. So all the money's going to be in one place. So they planned to rob it. They scouted out the town, said, these people aren't going to fight back. They're farmers and townspeople. This will kind of be easy pickings. September 7th, 10 o'clock in the morning, 4 of them ride into town. 11 o'clock, the other 4 ride into town. Some of them go on lunch. Then they come out. They go outside of town, they make their final plan. At 2 o'clock, they come back. They split up. 3 were going to go into the bank. Jesse, Frank, and Bob Younger. 2 of them were going to be outside for crowd control. They figured if the crowd starts getting suspicious, they'll just fire off some rounds and scare them away. And 3 were hanging around outside of town. They were going to come storming in to aid in the escape. So they go into the bank, Pretty soon the townspeople realize what's going on. They don't run away. They go into their homes and stores and they get their guns. And the shooting starts. So while these guys are in the bank, they hear the gunfire outside. Inside, Jesse tells the teller, open the vault. It's not locked. But he won't, and Frank goes inside the vault, and the teller, Joseph Haywood, tries to close him in. Jesse grabs him and puts a knife to his throat. And he squirms away. The other teller runs to the back and is going out the back door. Frank pulls out his gun, conks Joseph Haywood on the head, almost knocks him out on the ground, fires a shot over his head, starts shooting it. So they're shooting inside the bank, they're shooting outside the bank. Finally, outside, guns are blazing. And one of the outlaws is killed. Cole Younger gets shot in the hip. He gets back on his horse. Jesse, he yells to the guys in the bank, "Get out of there. You gotta get out of here." Before Jesse leaves, he goes to Joseph Haywood, who was not cooperating, and he shoots him in the head. Leaves, and they get on their horses, but Bob Younger's horse was shot dead while he was in the bank. So his brother comes, and before he can pick him up, he gets shot in the elbow, and his arm is just dangling. So you got the two of them, one shot in the hip, one shot in the arm. They're on the same horse. Now they're all heading out south of the town. They netted $26.60. That was their take. They missed a drawer that had $2,000 in it, but they were in too much of a hurry. All of this takes 10 minutes. And now, as soon as they ride out of town, the telegraph is sent out all over the place. And there almost immediately is a massive manhunt. They're coming from Minneapolis, St. Paul, they're coming from all over to catch these guys. The problem is, they don't know who they are. They have no idea who these robbers are. And they're just in the Cape, they're robbers, but they don't know who they are. They take off, and they end up riding from here into this area called the Big Woods. And the Big Woods was 3,000 square miles. It's trees and lakes and streams and marshes and a lot of feral hogs. They're totally disoriented. They're unfamiliar with this. They don't know where they are or where they're going, but neither do the manhunters. They're all disoriented. And then their biggest problem is, starting that day for the next 2 weeks, it's going to rain without stopping. And rain, and they're getting soaked and drenched. Their horses, they've used them up, and they come to a point where they think they're better off on foot. The problem is they all are wearing riding boots, which were not meant for walking a lot. They have the high heels, so they get into the stirrups. So they're walking, their feet get torn up. And even when they try to sleep, they're putting their coats over branches, and they're just getting soaked. And they're all lost, they're all tired, and they're all miserable. September 14th, a week later, Bob Younger, the guy whose arm is dangling, he's slowing them down. And so they all decide, Frank and Jesse, you need to go on your own. So Frank and Jesse take off, and they rob some horses on their way out at different farms, and they're long gone. They'll make it out within a week. They will end up back from here, they'll wander, and they'll get all the way back to Missouri, but not the other four. They're in the Big Woods. And finally, in a town, they didn't get very far, somewhere around here, They get out of the woods and they get into a final gunfight. And a number of them get wounded and they finally surrender. And on September 23rd, the hunt for Jesse and Frank is called off. And they're gone. The other four, they're sentenced to life in prison. Bob died in prison. Jim and Cole, they were paroled in 1901. The James boys, when they got back, they went to Nashville. But then in 1879, Jesse's back and ready to reconvene another gang. And Frank gets into one final train robbery with him in 1881 and says, "That's it, I'm going straight." And he's done with Jesse. When Cole gets out of prison, he links up with Cole and they get involved in something called the Cole Younger and Frank James Wild West Show in 1903, for about a year. It's similar to Wild Bill Cody's Wild West Show, and he had Sitting Bull. Well, they go and they put on what they think is a presentation of what it was like in the West. Even Wild Bill Hickok was an actor in one of these. He didn't last long because he got mad. These were supposed to be serious. And he did one in Rochester. And the audiences laughed from beginning to end. And he says, "Well, what's wrong with these people? This is a serious play." But they just laughed him off. Jesse, Frank died in 1915. Cole died in 1916. It's caught my attention when it said Frank died in 1915. My father was called Frank. My middle name is Frank. And he was born in 1915. And I said, they wouldn't have named him after this.
I think so.
Jesse, in 1882, he had recruited a new gang, and one of them, Robert Ford, there was a price on Jesse's head. Robert Ford shot and killed him, trying to get the reward. Never got too far with it. It's 10-2.
You decide, you're in charge.
I can tell you about Wild Bill Hickok quickly. He ends up going to Deadwood, and that's where he had this premonition he was going to die in Deadwood. He wasn't a marshal or anything. He had been that for about 13 months before. Supposedly killed about 8 men. He was involved in the first recorded quick draw gunfight in Springfield, Missouri, July 1865. Killed Davis Tutt. He was an Indian fighter, an Army scout, a spy, a sharpshooter, a buffalo hunter, an actor, as I mentioned. And then he became a gambler. He had real eyesight problems. He gets to Deadwood in July of 1876, along with Calamity Jane. And they're part of a wagon train. This wagon train is going through this. Deadwood is a dump. It's a mud main street, and crowds are around. The ones who were in Deadwood are cheering and clapping. It's not for Calamity and it's not for Wild Bill. Who was in that wagon train were the ladies of very little virtue. That's who they were cheering. Saloon number 10 is where Wild Bill takes up residence. He had an interesting, every day when he woke up, he went out, took his 2 guns, and shot target practice at trees. Then he had a shot of whiskey. Then he went to breakfast. He had a sidekick, Colorado Charlie. The miners thought these were 2 strange guys because they took a bath every day. Miners almost never took a bath. But they did. August 1st, Wild Bill has a lucky streak, and one of the players, Jack McCall, loses a lot of money, loses everything. Wild Bill gives him money for breakfast. That's to placate him. The next day, he comes back to play poker, and You may have heard the story, Wild Bill always sat with his back to the wall. Well, that seat was taken, the guy wouldn't move, so he sits down and his back is to the door, and in comes McCall, and he hangs around for a little bit. Eventually he makes his way to where Wild Bill is sitting, puts a gun to the back of his head, blows his brains out. He runs away. But before he does, he's got the gun, click, 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 click. No runs. The only round that ever came out of that gun is the one that killed Wild Bill. Nothing else worked. He runs out, he jumps on a horse, the saddle is loose, and he falls off. So he runs into a store, they gather him, they have a miners' trial, which Deadwood is a totally illegal town. There's no legal standing whatsoever. It's in Indian territory. So they don't have law.